The long run, Israel has been historically as the scapegoat to monopolize the people and there is an enemy for those governments to exist the way they did. I think in 10 years, at least I'm hoping in 10 years from now, which is
because I couldn't read everything here, but that was a traumatic experience. I obviously wanted to go there and just to inspect the passions that this place had once housed, you know. I mean, I was born in that house. I wanted to be there. I knocked on the door. This old man comes out with a heavy East European accent, and he asks me what I want in Hebrew. I tell him I ask him, do you speak English? And he goes, yes, I do. And I say, look, I was wondering if you would mind if I just looked around. He, of course, is surprised by my strange, bizarre request. So to edify him, I say, look, I was born in this house. So he lets me in, and he says, you were born here and you don't speak Hebrew? I said, look, I'm an Arab, I'm not a Jew. So he had arthritis, and I could tell his arthritic attack was aggravated. And then I add, because I got flustered, and I add, well, actually, it's like, I'm American, I'm just like trying to visit. I'm just trying to check. But you could tell that he wants me out of the house. I don't know whose house it was. It's my house, his house, our house, God damn it. It doesn't make a difference. He wanted me out of that house. And that, in my view, is a metaphor. The incident is a metaphor about the confrontation between the Palestinians and the Israelis. He's a man who clearly, who clearly came from Eastern Europe, living in my house, the house that my parents or grandparents had actually built, where I was born. He's telling me to get the hell out of there because it's now his house. Thank you, sir.
So you were not warmly and cordially really received then?
By this one particular man, I was not. Because you see, what I did by knocking on his door and confronting him with my reality was to assault every conceivable political value that he had believed in as an Israeli or as a Zionist.
Nevertheless, until he established that you could not speak Hebrew, he didn't know who you were.
That's
he
true.
looked on your face, and you were just another person.
Yeah.
Perhaps someone just born in that house.
But the very moment I identified myself as a Palestinian, my identity itself became an assault on his very senses, on his political system.
Did they know who you were when you went? I mean, you went to buy in the airport, Led Matar Airport.
Well, obviously,
as
when
an
I
American
went,
citizen, how did they? Did you have any difficulties getting in? Or
well,
anybody
they
knew who you were?
searched my earlobes.
Sure. But they had.
So you're hearing much better.
As an American citizen, you didn't get any different
well,
treatment
I mean,
as a
obviously
name?
they had to let me in because I'm an American, you see.
But your name was
You know, I look as American as napalm. You know what I mean? What do they say? As American as apple pie. I say as American as napalm. You know. No, but clearly, when I went through immigration, they knew that I was a Palestinian, though I was a naturalized American. And
anyone had the knowledge that you were a writer, who you are, you're Fawaz Turki?
No, they didn't know who I was then. I was just a nameless, faceless American, Palestinian American, visiting Israel.
That's what you think.
Excuse me?
That's what you think, probably.
Where did you
Well,
go? Where did you go into Israel?
everything.
You didn't cross the Jordan. You didn't go first into.
no, I just traveled all over Palestine, including Israel, West Bank, Gaza.
And you landed in Tel Aviv. Right here.
I landed in Tel Aviv. Yes, yes. Habib, I'm sorry, I didn't get your question.
I said that's what you probably think, that you were passing there as an incognito, but probably ears and eyes were on.
Yeah,
Big
I
Brother
have
was
no
watching.
doubt that they punched, you know, their computer and my name came up. You know, this is a Palestinian well-known figure in the States, and he's anti-Israeli, and he's on the lecture circuit. Excuse me, and he wants you to buy it. Yes, he wants it.
well in Israel.
But you,
Yes.
but you weren't-
That's a good question. Did
It
you
is
take your
selling-
books?
This is ironic. It is
Did you
selling
take
in
your
Israel.
books with you? Any of your books, or you went there? You
No,
had
this book
already
had
a
not
type
come
book.
out yet. In fact,
Okay,
I
but
went.
you had already 2 books prior.
Yeah, I didn't take any books with me. I mean,
Oh,
my
okay.
old books, I mean,
I
no.
ask you, in your first reading, you referred to these people. I believe you were in Haifa then.
Yeah, Israelis. Yeah.
And I understand the frustration about all of the confusion that's going on that is not allowing the building of Palestine. But who are these people? Are these people inclusive of Palestinians and Israelis, or who are these? I mean,
When I said these people in Haifa, Haifa is now almost an exclusively Jewish city. So when I said these people, I meant Israelis. So I was essentially talking. You see, if you had read this chapter from the outset, you would know that I'm actually referring to exclusively Israelis, not other people, just Israelis. You see.
Can you tell us a little bit about your experience when you went to, I think it was Jericho, when you were staying at an apartment, a friend's apartment, and your friend was caught in a curfew somewhere else in a different city, and he couldn't come to see you for 3 days,
That's true.
and you went through a lot of turmoil then because you didn't know.
Yes,
What-
I mean, I had never been subjected to something called curfew. Actually, we had in Washington, D.C. Mayor Kelly subjected us.
Were you here in '68 when they had the
No, not 68, but I was here for the Kelly thing.
Adams Morgan?
on the streets.
Adams
We had a
Morgan, but
one-day curfew.
We never took that seriously. In fact, we thought it was a party. Because, you know, me and a whole bunch of my friends got a case of beer or something, and we holed up all night, and we talked and drank, and we never took it seriously. But when you say curfew
right.
in Palestine,
You get
you're
off the
talking
streets,
about a
the
foreign
roads, absolutely.
military occupation, soldiers with Uzis and guns and canisters and bombs and personnel carriers and stuff like that.
here
And
in
it's
68
scary.
When King was killed.
Is that right,
They
68?
brought the troops in.
I
they
read
brought
about
the
it.
National Guard in.
Indeed,
And
I
they
read
were
about it.
backing people up with their bayonets. And
Indeed.
curfew.
I've seen pictures of that. I've seen documentaries about it. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
But in the West Bank and Gaza, and possibly in Israel, I don't know about Israel, this is a daily occurrence.
Daily occurrence.
By
Yes, sir.
sundown, you're off the road, you're off the street, you're squirreled away in your house, or your life is in danger, seriously.
That is
Legally
true.
so.
And if you are caught either by the by soldiers or by the brutal border police after hours, man, nobody's going to hear from you or about you
That's right.
for a long time.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's it happens all the time. It happens without warning. Israelis will say they will be marching, they'll be driving down the streets with their bullhorns. All right, curfew is on tonight at 6 o'clock, and people are scurrying around like rats. Excuse me. They're trying to buy groceries, and the curfew could go on from anything from 24 hours to 24 days. Yes, sir. But you know, it's great. Curfews have become, ironically enough, curfews have become a kind of time for bonding. You know, people living in, let's say, a high-rise apartment, and we're talking about, let's say, 50 families or something, and the doors are open, you know, all the doors are open, people are wandering in and out, sharing food, and they come in and see you. Hi, Abu Ali, do you have enough bread? Oh no, I'm short of bread here, but I need some onions. You know what I'm saying? People are bonding big time, sharing, talking, and dig this, man. They are dancing and they are singing. Yes, and I was in that curfew for 3 days in Ramallah that Habib was talking about, man. And I thought it was like the most beautiful 3 days that I had spent anywhere, you know? People were dancing all the time, moving in and out of people's like different apartments, kids. You know what I'm saying? When I'm talking about dancing like the folk circle dancing, you know, the dabki, okay? And so it's like, in other words, they are saying to the Israelis outside, the oppressors, go fuck yourself. You know what I'm saying? We don't care. I mean, literally, this is, in effect, what, you'd edit this out, won't you? What this, in effect, is what the Palestinians under curfew are saying, we will not be cowed. I mean, the fact that these people have retained their sanity after a quarter century of occupation must attest to the resilience, or some kind of resilience, that this society has. I mean, the fact that these people, after like 20 years of occupation, still came back with an uprising, intifada, a word that has become naturalized by the entire planet, attests to the fact that these people will not be cowed. And I don't think they are going to be cowed by Yasser Arafat either, who is now serving the interests of the Israeli occupation. See, what I'm suggesting to you, the reason that a great many of us, Palestinian Democrats, writers, poets, activists, dismiss this so-called peace agreement is because we think it's a trick. But it's more than a trick. It's more sinister than just a trick. What this agreement is, this harks back to the process of decolonization in the 40s and 50s when the British and the French were granting, you remember the term they used to use? We are granting the Algerians independence, you know? The process of decolonization essentially is the British would move out of India or move out of Nigeria or whatever, and say, well, we are granting independence to the Nigerian people. But in this egregious, sinister process, they leave behind a leadership elite that is subservient to them and is guaranteed to serve their interests forevermore. In other words, this leadership elite will be in power to continue the process of colonization, except in this case, the colonizers are not physically in the country. In other words, the colonizers, in this case the British, will continue to exploit the labor and the resources of Nigeria without them actually being there to do it themselves. So this is what's been happening in this is the history of the second half of the 20th century, my friends. This is named the struggle of indigenous people, the struggle of oppressed peoples who had been formerly colonized, struggling against indigenous elites who are serving the interests of the former colonizers. And this is what Yasser Arafat and the PLO, that has been totally corrupted and totally bought by the Israelis and Washington. Sold out indeed. Thank you. That sums it up for me.
Well, you take Hamas, who was started by the Israelis themselves, and now Hamas has turned on their initial benefactors.
Let me correct you, Charles. Hamas was not started by the Israelis. Hamas was started independently. Let me continue. Hamas was started independently of the Israelis, but the Israelis actually turned a kind of blind eye to the existence of Hamas because they thought, I'm talking about the 80s, middle 80s,
right.
Okay? Because they thought that the existence of Hamas would act to block or to impede or to confuse the work of the PLO. But of course, Hamas is, regardless of what you believe about them, regardless of what their convictions are, you know, whether you believe in them or not, this is a group that I take very seriously. This is a group that has grown organically from the malaise, the oppression, the suffering of the Palestinian people. Above all, Hamas has grown as a response to the corruption, ineptitude, and cynicism of the PLO. I'm talking about PLO officialdom. As PLO officials, I have seen them with my eye. I was myself very close to the PLO. I used to be close to Yasser Arafat and all his henchmen. I have seen them with my own eyes, traveling on the Concorde with Samsonites full of cash. This is our money, the people's money. This money was given to the PLO by the Saudis and in those days Kuwaitis and so on and so forth, plus money given to the PLO by Palestinian expatriate workers to be held in trust by the PLO to be dispersed fairly, justly to the Palestinian people. No, this money became the possession of PLO officialdom, and you see them to this day. They're living in $1 million homes, and they don't يعني على سرميتهم العتيقة شو بيصير بشعبهم. That is, in Arabic, what I said was, and they don't give a good goddamn about the fate of their people. You know, you see them today. They're living right here in McLean, Virginia, or whatever. Yes, Mohammed?
Yeah, I'll ask you a more general question has to do with this, they call it Sahwa Dini, or the called fundamentalism, Islamic fundamentalism in Arab, or the word fundamentalism. I can't find an equivalent to Sahwa in English, maybe revival. Is there any relation? Revival?
Awakening?
Awakening, yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe awakening
okay.
is better, yeah. But anyway, is there any relationship between it and the speeding up of the peace process? It seems to me that there was some rush, to have some peace between the Arabs in general, and Palestinians in particular, and the Israelis as soon as possible, because of this huge movement that is sweeping the whole Arab world.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's a very interesting question. First of all, by the way, let's guard against using the term Islamic fundamentalists.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as Islamic fundamentalism. Fundamentalism is a function of the evolution of Christianity, not Islam. I say Islamic activist or Islamic theoretician or ideologue or fighter or whatever, but I never speak of an Islamic fundamentalist. You can even say an Islamic absolutist, even, I would go along with that. But you could never say an Islamic fundamentalist. Fundamentalism, as I was saying, is a function of the evolution of Christianity as a religion and as a social ideology, Now, yes, I have a suspicion that, in fact, the speeding up of the peace process was a consequence of the concern by the Israelis and by the Arab leadership elite and by Washington that the Islamic awakening in the Arab world was, in fact, on the march, and unless a settlement was reached as soon as possible, that this would create a vacuum that would be filled by this Islamic movement. This is why we see today the unbelievable spectacle of the Israeli government, Israeli army, Israeli intelligence trying to protect the life of Yasser Arafat. I mean, I'm talking about the PLO, a
There are
group.
those who think that he may not be protected by the Israelis very long. In fact, the old chemistry professor at Peter University,
Shah.
he says Rabin is about to serve up Arafat's head on a silver platter if, he will use an excuse what Hamas has been doing to have Yasser Arafat taken out.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you
The
see,
Israelis win either way.
Yeah.
If the Palestinians assassinate him, fine. And if not, he'll discredit himself. But the Palestinian people will be divided into Bantustans, reservations,
There you go.
and their cause will be squandered and frittered away.
Who will take his place in case he was?
who will take his place? I'm quite convinced that the Islamic awakening, to use your translation of the term, is a movement all over the Arab world that should indeed be taken very seriously. You see, this is a movement, the awakening, or the renaissance of Islamic activism, revivalism, occurred or began to emerge, possibly, if you want to take a point of departure, I would say 1967, after the June War. That is because up till the June War, sometimes known as the Six-Day War, the Arab masses had actually put all their eggs in the nationalist basket. Okay, they had believed in Baathism, Pan-Arabism, Nasserism, anemic Bolshevik-style communism, that kind of thing. In other words, they believed in secular ideologies. They really believed that these ideologies, or one of them, or all of them, that somehow gelled as a nationalist ideology, will ultimately succeed in bringing about social justice and freedom in the Arab world and the liberation of Palestine. But by 1967, when the Arab armies had collapsed in a big heap, when they had collapsed in a big heap in, they say 6 days, actually I think it was 6 hours, this came as an incredible shock. And in a way, whether consciously or teleologically or unconsciously, the Arab masses began, in effect, to say, we have been betrayed by these ideologies. And they began, unconsciously, if you wish, and that's how it often happens, a kind of movement toward the one social ideology that the Arab masses, strangely enough, had not embraced for a long, long time. The one ideology that grew out of the very bosom of their history, which was Islam. You know? And I see Islam as the wave of the future. Islam, not necessarily as a ritual religion, but indeed Islam as a social ideology, you know what I'm saying, that will... keep in mind, by the way, I'm interrupting myself here and digressing a little bit. Keep in mind that Islam, like any social ideology, like Christianity or whatever, is responsive to authoritarianism or responsive to democracy. It depends on how you interpret Islam. Some Muslims are reactionary, and they would interpret Islam in a reactionary manner. When we speak of the Islamic awakening or revival in the Arab world, we have to keep in mind that there are many Islamic movements in the Arab world. Some of which are indeed liberal. I'm not using the word liberal in a sort of John Lockean sense here, but liberal in the sense of not being reactionary. And others are sort of concerned with petty Mickey Mouse things like should women be allowed to have their hair cut in a hair salon by a man, you know, or something like that, you know. So, but come what may, I am convinced that in this vacuum that occurs in the Arab world, in the absence of social justice and freedom and democracy and a voice for the masses, I think this movement will in fact take place, and it will come back. It will come back and do exactly what the Iranians did. It'll become very anti-American, very anti-imperialist, you know? Because to go back to what you said earlier, before the reading started, Washington has historically acquired friends in the Third World. And who are these friends? These friends essentially were the indigenous elite that served the interests of American imperialism in that part of the world. And so, when they thought of Iran, what is Iran? Iran was what the Shah thought. What is Nicaragua? What Somoza thought. What is Egypt? What Sadat thought. And there came a time when the masses, as often happens, as always happens, swept away these flunkies, you know, and threw them down the dustbin of history. Because I happen to believe that in the end, in the historical process, in human existence, human beings do make a difference. Human beings do make a difference. Human beings do make history. You know, it is not. This is not a one-man show. You know, what is happening all over the Arab world, in Africa, including North Africa, in the Middle East, in Southeast Asia, in the Indian subcontinent, and in South America. What is happening is an attempt by the peoples of these so-called underdeveloped countries to get rid of indigenous overlords that were left behind by, or that were propped up by, imperialists or former colonial overlords. This is the most salient struggle. If you want to sum it up in a few words, this is really what has characterized the struggle of peoples in the Third World this entire century. The ironic part of it all is that there has not been a single national struggle in the first and the second half of the 20th century by oppressed peoples that had not been accompanied by violence. Vietnamese fought against the French and the Americans because the French and the Americans wanted to put puppets in Saigon. And the people in Central and South America are fighting against totalitarian regimes and dictators, and they are dying for their cause because they are trying to get rid of these puppets that Washington, or in those days London and Paris, propped up. This is essentially what it's all about. And so long as Washington continues to define the political ethos of a society through the court.
Fawaz, Turkey is one of the most interesting and illuminating of the Palestinian writers, and it was our privilege to have him here this evening for our program, Mideast Realities. Please tune in next week on this channel at the same time for another Mideast Realities.
دراسة حقت اللي بتصير
I'm going to build a stand.